Madam Chairperson, my fellow distinguished members of panel, organizers of this conference, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the organizers for this conference for the privilege to participate as a speaker on this conference. I'm really humbled. Ladies and gentlemen, there are very few things in human life that are universal, like searching for knowledge and wisdom. When a person is small, the search is limited to his or her immediate needs. But as soon as he conquers a world of words, the search converts into questions. Who, what, where, when, how, and why. A human being is born with a thirst for knowledge and a hunger for wisdom. The thirst for knowledge and the hunger for wisdom is part and parcel of what I may term in the ICT terminology a C drive of his or her life. A well-known terminology of the search for knowledge and wisdom is education. Education has various definitions, but in this context, I would like to define education as a holistic preparation of an individual to become a meaningful member of a community. What happens in education should determine a person's contribution to his or her society. The child or a person was taught the shared values, whether it is political, social, cultural, or economical, that were dear to the society, and each member of a community was expected to live according to these shared values. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living today in a fast-changing world, a world caught up in what I may call a digital revolution. For developing countries like ours, this revolution caused a socio-cultural shock. Without warning, without social or psychological preparation, developing countries have been invaded by this tsunami of a digital revolution. In developed countries, this revolution goes back 3 to 5 generations. In developing countries, we are nearly all in the first generation of the change, which took only a few decades for its way to be paved. Now, a new rapid rhythm is beating from the drums of science and technology, modern communication and mass media, schools and universities, cities and towns. Nothing and nobody can stop this rhythm or slow down its tempo. The men and the women in the developing country must get up and dance on the drama, on the arena of the drama of this revolution, for better or for worse. It is against this background that I found the topic of this session appropriate and timely. Vision 2020. I said 2030 because we also in Namibia have a Vision 2030. I was at 2030. Vision 2020, reforming the education landscape and strategies for the future. Through the ages, responsibility of guiding students through the journey of searching knowledge was given to the person who was known as a teacher. Different languages guru or whatever you want to, rabbi or whatever you want to call him. He took the lead and showed the way. Unfortunately, today, in especially developing countries, it seems as if the teacher is lagging behind. With such rapid change in educational technologies, as part of the process of reforming the education landscape and strategies for the future, the teacher needs to be retrained, especially in ICT, to cope with the rapidly changing education technologies. The quality of the teacher and their the quality of the teachers and their continuing professional education and training remain central to the achievement of quality education. This is one of the many challenges we are facing today that must be addressed in the process of reforming the education landscape and strategic for future. UNESCO believes that these challenges can be addressed through a holistic, systemic approach to education and teacher development systems in ways that also incorporate the enabling role of the ICT. Some countries like the UK made it a central and higher profile strand of education policy to develop educationally empowered teaching force so that ICT is embedded in teaching and learning. Now, challenges that we might face in this reform. Number one, education system. Especially in developing countries, you do have different education systems. To combine them in order to do the same thing, it becomes a problem. While I was sitting here and listening, I heard also even in terms of Indian education systems, in higher school, lower primary schools and so on, even universities, they do have different education systems. That is a challenge. How do you bring them together and make them one so that you have all the people in the same stream? The next challenge is the level of development. Different countries, different regions have developed different development, especially in ICT. Some might have a problem of electricity. Even classes in some developing countries like in Africa, children are still under the trees, are being taught under the trees. The question is, how do you bring ICT there? And then you have another challenge of different level of technologies. We are talking about the 2Gs, the 3Gs, the 4Gs. How do you bring these two things, all these things together in order to enhance the ICT, which has become a very important tool of education if you want to reform. And then we do also have a lack of infrastructures. I already mentioned about schools, about children who are still under the classes, under the trees, and then ICT libraries, we tend to have them in some schools, ICT centers, electricity, telephone lines. All this has to do with how you can enhance education with ICT. Human resources, one, this is also very important, that we don't have the ICT qualified teachers, ICT advisors, ICT technicians in some parts of developing countries. Then finance, those who control finance. Finance is always scarce, but it depends on the priorities. Those who control finance, do they see education as a priority? If not, then you have a problem. Now, the strategies for the future. I think we have to reform syllabus and curriculum. We have to reform teachers' training courses to accommodate this very important thing which we call ICT as part of the syllabus. we have to involve people. That is the PPP. It's not only the government, not only the education, but we do have to, we need business people, we need even traditional leaders, we need religious leaders to get involved in education so that it may become our education, not their education. And the last one is the usage of mobiles. You know, every one of us have a mobile here. And most of the students and learners have mobiles. The challenge is I would like to see how these readily available instrument tools can be converted into education tool. I think that is a challenge that will face those who are intending to reform education. Just for your interest's sake, according to the key statistics highlights of the ITU data released in June 2002, total mobile cellular subscription reached almost 6 billion by the end of 2011, corresponding to global penetration of 86%. Now, the interesting part of it is that the growth of these mobiles, of the availability of the mobiles, the growth was driven by the developing countries, which accounted for more than 80% of the 660 million new mobile cellular subscription added in 2011. I think we might have an answer here, that if the developing countries have so much cell phones, but they don't have electricity, they don't have centers, ICT centers, why can't we come up with an idea of making use of these cell phones to reach those people who can't be reached with the normal way of education? There are some NGOs that are promoting ICT, even in rural areas. Here I will give you an example of the ICTs for rural Africa. The uniqueness of this organization is that it endeavors to reach rural and other poor communities that would not have traditionally been included in similar or related projects. Now, in terms of education, this same NGO helps bridging the digital divide between city schools and rural schools. Their long-term goal in this regard is to see both rural and city learners talking the same language of technology in their first year of tertiary level. Let me conclude. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the success of Vision 2020, reforming education landscape and strategies for the future, will be measured by how it addresses the dichotomy of our world today. In reality, our world today is two worlds: one rich, one poor, one literate, one largely illiterate, one overfed and overweight, one hungry and malnourished, one affluent and consumption-oriented, one poverty-stricken and substance-oriented. So that is how Lester Brown stated it in his book entitled In the Human Interest. Just a reminder, the world is looking up to education to show the way, not to governance, not to health, because it was here in education where the first step of the governor, of the president, of whoever governs this world started, where the first step of the medical doctor started to become what they are. So the ball, once again, is back to education. It is up to us to take it or to leave it. Thank you very much.